I found out what I had done at 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday when my phone buzzed so hard it fell off my nightstand. I grabbed it off the floor and saw 47 unread emails before I was even fully awake. Every single one had the same subject line: RE, Q3 all hands recap and action items, and the number kept climbing. By the time I was standing up, it was 56. Let me be clear about something before I get into this. I am not a chaotic person. I make lists. I own a label maker. I have a folder in my inbox called Sent Safely, where I drag emails after I've confirmed they went to the right place. I used to proofread text messages before sending them to my mom. That version of me died at 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday in October, and this is the story of what killed her. Every disaster has an origin story. Mine starts the Tuesday before. I'm Marisol. I was 31 at the time, working as a mid-level communications coordinator at Drayden Consulting Group, about 210 employees, 3 floors, one glass-walled conference room on the top floor that the executives called the fishbowl. The name was supposed to sound cool. The rest of us called it that too, but not because we thought it was cool. Drayden's CEO was a man named Clifford Page. Cliff, 54 years old, firm handshake he deployed constantly, and he communicated almost entirely in phrases from airport business books. Everything was about synergy ecosystems and forward momentum levers and unlocking the human capital flywheel. That last one is a direct quote from a company-wide email he sent in March. I saved it. Every quarter, Cliff did an all-hands meeting in the fishbowl while the rest of us watched via video link or crammed into the overflow room on the second floor. 90 minutes of Cliff saying things like, "We're not just building a company, we're building a movement," while someone in the back row tried to look like they weren't checking sports scores. My job as communications coordinator was to send the post-meeting recap email. I gathered notes from each department head, formatted them into a clean summary, added Cliff's key talking points, and sent the whole thing to the full company list, 212 people. I'd done it 6 times before. Never a problem. Except this time, the Tuesday all-hands ran long. Way long. Cliff had a guest speaker, a consultant named Brad who had apparently coached 3 Fortune 500 CEOs on something called resonant leadership architecture. Brad was not a man who believed in ending on time. The meeting started at 2, was supposed to wrap at 3:30, and actually ended at 5:20. That's when Brad finally stopped saying emotional ROI long enough for someone to cut his microphone. By the time it was over, I had 17 pages of notes, a stress headache behind my left eye, and exactly 40 minutes before I needed to pick up my friend Deja's dog. She was out of town, and I'd promised to cover. The dog, a retriever named Hector, needed his evening walk and his specific prescription kibble and his medication before 7 or his stomach would, quote, go sideways. I'd agreed to all of it weeks ago. I sat at my desk at 5:23 and made a decision I will regret for the rest of my working life. I would draft the recap email quickly, save it, finish it in the morning, and send it by 9 a.m. Clean, responsible plan. I told myself that. Here's what derailed it. My coworker Priya, who I adore, who is my work best friend, who I will never fully forgive, stopped at my desk on her way out and said, "Can you believe Brad said emotional ROI 11 times? I counted." I laughed, then I said, "Give me 2 minutes." Priya and I had spent 3 years at Drayden, privately making fun of Cliff's jargon while staying outwardly professional. Over that time, I'd gotten good at mimicking his cadence. The way he'd pause after every third word for dramatic effect, the way he'd say, "Here's the thing," before saying something that was not, in fact, a thing. I'd do the impression in the break room when only Priya was around, and she'd lose it every time. So I started typing. Right there in my email draft, the one I'd opened to start the real recap. I wasn't going to send it. I was just keeping Priya entertained for 2 minutes while she stood at my desk with her bag on her shoulder. I typed a fake version of the all-hands recap in full Cliff voice, every phrase cranked up to an insane level. I had him describe the Q3 numbers as a love letter to our synergy ecosystem. I had him say, "We are not disrupting the industry, we are disrupting disruption itself." I wrote Brad in as a resonance sherpa guiding us to our emotional summit. A whole fake section called Brad's Gift to Us, in which Brad apparently revealed that the real ROI was the emotional friends we made along the way. I was typing fast, and Priya was laughing, and it was taking way more than 2 minutes, but neither of us cared. She had tears running down her face. I was in that specific tired giddy mode where everything you do feels funnier than it actually is. 4 solid paragraphs, I was proud of them. Then my phone rang. The dog sitter reminding me about Hector's medication window. I said I was leaving right now. I clicked save on the draft and grabbed my bag. Here is where I need to explain something about our email platform. Drayden used a system called CollabMail, which appeared to have been designed by someone who genuinely hated the people who would use it. It looked like standard email software, but behaved like a fever dream. One of its quirks, not consistent, just frequent enough to keep you paranoid, was that when you opened an existing draft, it would sometimes auto-populate the TIF field with the last group you'd emailed. The company called this a smart reply feature. It was supposed to save time. I knew this in the same way checking your blind spot matters, right up until the moment you don't. Wednesday morning, 6:50 a.m., I was up early because I wanted to get in, finish the recap, send it before 9, and be a professional. I fed Hector, walked him, dropped him back at Deja's place, and got to the office at 7:35, poured my first coffee, sat down, opened my drafts folder, opened the email. And here is the part I still can't fully explain because I have gone over it 100 times. I saw the draft. I saw the 4 paragraphs of parody Cliff speak. And instead of opening a new email and writing the actual recap from scratch, I just kept editing what was in front of me. I was half asleep. I thought I was cleaning it up. I was reading sentences like Brad, our resonance Sherpa, led us to the emotional summit of Q3, and I thought I was deleting them. But what I was actually doing was adding real content around them and leaving chunks of the parody sitting in between, because I was tired and on my first coffee and running at maybe 60%. I edited for 20 minutes. I added the real Q3 numbers. I added the actual department updates, the real action items, and threaded through all of it between every other legitimate paragraph were pieces of the parody. The synergy ecosystem love letter, the disrupting disruption line, a full section where I'd written in Cliff's exaggerated voice that the company's true North Star was not a star at all but a feeling, and that feeling is momentum, and that momentum is us. I didn't catch it, I hit send. Not to Priya, not just to my manager, to the full company list, 212 people, including Cliff. The send confirmation popped up at 7:41 a.m. I poured my second coffee. At 7:43, my phone started vibrating across the desk. 47 emails, then 51, then 56. Subject line on every single one, RE, Q3 all hands recap and action items. I went completely still. The kind of still where you're not sure you're breathing. My brain couldn't process what it was seeing fast enough, like it was trying to protect me from the information. I stood there watching the count climb to 61. I opened one. It was from a guy in finance named Todd who I barely knew. All it said was, "Did you mean to send this?" I opened my sent folder. I read what I'd sent. All of it. The real content and the parody content, tangled together, delivered to every single person at Drayden Consulting Group at 7:41 in the morning. I sat down on the floor, not in a chair, the floor, I just folded straight down. I had described Cliff's leadership vision as a warm fog of intention. I had written the Q3 revenue projections, real, accurate numbers, immediately followed by a paragraph about how numbers are merely the language of the universe trying to tell us we are winning. Brad had his entire fake section crediting him with revealing that the real ROI was the emotional friends we made along the way. My phone rang. Priya. I answered, and she was laughing so hard she couldn't get words out, and under any other circumstances, I would have loved that. In that moment, it made my stomach drop through the floor. She finally got 3 words out. Marisol, Cliff read it. I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because he replied all." I checked my inbox. There it was. From Clifford, page sent at 7:46 a.m., addressed to all 212 people. 3 words, "Please see me." Not Marisol, please see me, just please see me, company-wide. I got dressed in whatever I could find. I drove to the office in a state I can only describe as fully dissociated. I parked and sat in the car for 4 minutes staring at the building. Then I went in. The second I walked through the front door, I knew everyone had read it. The lobby had that specific charged silence you only get when something big just happened. The receptionist, Glenda, had worked there 12 years and seen everything. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not disapproval, something like awe. I took the elevator to the second floor, head down, moving fast. I could still hear it, conversations dropping as I walked past, and then a beat later, muffled laughter. Someone in the IT section started slow clapping as I went by. I did not look up. My manager, Renata, was waiting at my desk. She was 43, sharp, the kind of manager who gave you room to work, but expected you not to send parody emails to 200 people. She skipped good morning entirely. She said, "Cliff wants you in the fishbowl at 9. I said, "How bad is it?" She said, "Marisol, you called his strategic vision a warm fog." I sat down. Someone had left a printout of the email on my keyboard with the phrase, "warm fog of intention," highlighted in yellow. I threw it in the trash and opened my laptop and tried to breathe. For the next 45 minutes, the reply all chain kept growing. Some people couldn't help responding to say it was hilarious. Others replied all to tell everyone to stop replying all. By 8:15, the thread had 261 messages. Someone in legal replied all with a gif of a man walking into a glass door. Someone in HR replied all telling everyone to stop using reply all. That email also went to everyone. At 8:45, my coworker Desmond, who sat 3 desks over and who I'd always considered a neutral party, walked past and dropped a printout of the Brad's gift to use section on my desk with a sticky note that said, "Frame this." He walked away without a word. At 9 a.m., I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The fishbowl was all glass, so I could see in from the hallway. Cliff was standing at the head of the table, arms crossed. Renata was there. So was Linda from HR, a small woman in her late 50s who always looked like she was already tired of whatever conversation she was about to have. I opened the door, sat down, and didn't wait. "I'm so sorry. It was a draft that I accidentally mixed with the real content and didn't proofread before sending. It was not intentional." Cliff looked at me for a long moment. He wasn't visibly furious the way I'd feared. He was composed, doing the thing he always did where he made you wait. He said, "The warm fog of intention." I said, "Yes, I'm sorry." He said, "You've been here 3 years. Then he said something I absolutely did not expect. "Is that actually what people think of my communication style?" Nobody answered. Linda shifted in her chair. Renata studied the table. I said, carefully, "I think the parody was an exaggeration of certain phrases that get repeated a lot in all-hands meetings." Cliff nodded slowly. He picked up a printed copy of the email, of course he'd printed it, and read from it out loud. The disrupting disruption line, the numbers as the language of the universe, the resonance sherpa. He put the paper down. "Brad actually said most of that." I blinked. "Not the warm fog thing, that one's yours." I said, "That's mine, yes." Then, and I need you to understand how surreal the next 30 seconds were, Cliff Page, CEO of Drayden Consulting Group, made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not a full laugh. A short exhale through his nose that had some humor in it. He said, "I've been using a coach. I'm aware the language gets a little," he paused, "dense." Linda from HR cut in fast. "We do still need to discuss the impact on the company communication environment." And so we did for 40 minutes. Linda covered professional communication standards. Renata walked through the process for all company emails and where a proofreading check should have happened. I nodded, agreed, and apologized sincerely because I was sincerely horrified by what I'd done. No performance in it. At the end, Cliff said, "We're not going to terminate you over this, but I want a formal apology email sent to the full company list by noon." He paused. "I want you to keep your job because you clearly pay close attention to what I say, even when you're using it to make fun of me." I wrote the apology. Renata reviewed it 3 times. I sent it at 11:50 a.m. to all 212 people. Professional, direct, no accidental comedy. I read every sentence out loud before I hit send. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. At 2 p.m., a calendar invite landed from Cliff's assistant. The meeting was the following Monday. The title, Communications Review, Cliff P. plus Marisol V. The next 3 days were a specific kind of purgatory. The office had settled into a new energy around me, respectful amusement, if that's a thing. People who had never spoken to me were stopping to say hi. Marcus from IT, the guy who slow-clapped me on the way in, came over to properly introduce himself and told me the Resonance Sherpa line was going to live in his memory forever. Desmond's sticky note story had gotten around, and 3 different people sent me gifs of people framing things. Priya felt genuinely terrible about her role, minimal but real. She'd been the one encouraging me to keep typing that night. She brought me coffee every morning for a week. Real coffee from the place down the street, not the office machine. That's love. My mom called because somehow word had gotten back to her through my cousin Bika, who works in a completely different industry and had still somehow heard about it. My mom asked if I'd been fired. I said no. She said, "Did you really call his vision a warm fog?" I said yes. She laughed for 2 minutes straight and then said, "Well, at least you're funny," which is the most backhanded, supportive thing she has ever said to me. Monday came. I went to the meeting not knowing what to expect. A demotion, maybe, restricted email access, a long lecture. Cliff sat across from me and slid a document across the table. A list, about 30 phrases pulled from company-wide communications, quarterly reviews, all-hands transcripts, and past emails. All classic Cliff. Dense, jargon-heavy, abstract. He said, "I want you to rewrite these. Plain language, clear, something people actually understand." I stared at the paper. "You want me to edit your communication style?" He said, "I want you to translate it. That's your actual job, isn't it? Communications." And that is how I accidentally got promoted into a new informal role as Cliff's internal communications editor. He started running his all-hands drafts past me before they went out. I flagged the jargon, suggested plain language, pushed back when something didn't land. He pushed back sometimes too, but he listened more than I expected. The all-hands meetings got shorter. The emails got cleaner. Over the following month, 3 different people emailed me independently to say the company updates were easier to follow, none of them knowing why. I didn't take credit. I filed those emails in a folder labeled Evidence I Still Have a Job. The reply all disaster became the thing I'm known for at Drayden. By the time the story passed through 4 people at the holiday party, apparently I had written an entire fake quarterly report and presented it to the board. I wrote 4 paragraphs in a draft and hit send by accident. The legend is bigger than the event. Desmond did, in fact, frame it. He printed the full email, put it in a cheap black frame from a drugstore, and hung it in his cubicle with a small placard underneath that read, "Great Art, 2023. I found out when someone sent me a photo. I went over to look at it in person. He was very proud. I told him he was a menace and he offered me a piece of gum. Brad, the Resonance Sherpa, was not brought back for the Q4 all hands. I don't know if that's connected. I choose to believe it is. Here's what I actually took away from all of it beyond the obvious. I now read every single email out loud before I hit send. Every one. Short ones, long ones, ones that just say, "Thanks." I look ridiculous doing it. I do not care. That habit has caught 3 near disasters in the 14 months since, including one time I almost sent a reply to a client that still had my internal note sitting at the top that said, "This guy is impossible. Why does he keep changing the scope?" But the bigger thing I learned is this. Sometimes the moment that feels like it's going to end your career doesn't end your career. Sometimes it just shows people something they didn't know was there. That email showed Cliff that the people around him had been smiling and nodding through language that didn't land. And instead of staying defensive about it, he did something with that information. And it showed me that I'd been so careful, so polished, so focused on being professionally invisible that I'd never actually used the skills I was hired to do. I'm not telling you to send a parody email to your entire company. I'm saying the worst morning of my professional life ended with me doing more interesting work than I'd done in 3 years, which I did not see coming from the floor of my kitchen at 7:43 a.m. Renata, for what it's worth, has never fully let me forget it. Every time I submit a company-wide email for her review, she reads it, nods, and says, "No warm fog?" And I say no warm fog, and she signs off. It's our thing now. I kind of love it. The framed email still hangs on Desmond's cubicle wall. I walked past it this morning. It still makes me cringe a little. But it also makes me laugh now, which I genuinely did not think would ever be possible on the day I sat on my kitchen floor watching my phone buzz 61 times. If you've ever hit send and immediately wanted to leave the country, what did you do? Drop it in the comments. I promise, whatever it is, you are not alone.